40 years ago today, the world was rocked by a shocking killing.
Millions of people mourned the tragic death of John Lennon today. The young and the middle-aged shared a sense of grief over the inexplicable slaying of Lennon, murdered by a young man who'd been a fan of Lennon and the Beatles for the last 15 years.
Today, The Athletic's Rustin Dodd joins us to remember that historic day and to explain the role that legendary sports broadcaster Howard Cosell and Monday Night Football played in breaking the news.
You're talking about maybe a fourth of televisions in the country are tuned into a football game on a Monday night. Howard Cosell is announcing that, a member of the Beatles, the biggest rock band of all time, had just been tragically killed in New York.
From Wondery and The Athletic, I'm Anders Kelto.
And I'm Kavitha Davidson. It's Tuesday, December 8th, and this is The Lead. So, Rustin, first let's talk about Monday Night Football as a cultural force. Can you explain how the show fit into the American pop culture landscape in the early 1970s?
Yeah, so the show, which launched in 1970, this was the first show that really took sports on television and put it through an entertainment lens.
15 seconds to air. Stand by, all cameras.
Ready with slow motion and isolated cameras.
There were technical advancements as well, more cameras, more highlight packages, things that would seem very simple in today's world, but more advanced in the early 1970s. That was a big part of it, but also just the presentation of the show as an entertainment package with special guest interviews.
The former governor of Maryland and, of course, the vice president of the United States, Mr. Spiro Agnew. And, sir, your knowledge of the Colts through all the years is extraordinary.
Well, I've been around them a little while, and I'm a very loyal Colt fan.
It was a mix of politics, television, television stars and people that can promote things.
O.J. Simpson of the Buffalo Bills. First of all, my good friend, my congratulations.
Thank you, Howard.
And personality-driven announcing crews that had never really been seen before until, this era of television.
When Howard Cosell was one of the original broadcasters of Monday Night Football, where was he at that point in his career?
Well, Howard Cosell had a fascinating backstory, obviously. Very famously, he was not a broadcaster by training. He was a lawyer. He grew up in Brooklyn. He was a sports fan. He started, with a local radio show in New York City that focused on things like Little League. By, the 1960s, he sort of emerged as a boxing commentator.
Now, let's get to the fight itself, to the one that has caused national controversy and national headlines throughout the past week.
And really sort of a face for the countercultural kind of movement that was happening in the United States.
But the black athlete says he is part of a revolution in America, a revolution designed to produce dignity for the black man, and that he is a human being before he is an athlete.
He was one of the only mainstream television commentators or television broadcasters that supported Muhammad Ali when he decided that he did not want to go to Vietnam.
He rejected military induction. The press, not quite, but almost unanimously, glad about what was being done to him. How do you feel about those people?
Well, I can't say that they were glad what was happening.
He sort of captured and reflected what was happening in the United States at that time, and he offered a different sort of sports broadcaster. He was more critical of players, he was more honest, he was more blunt. He was just gonna, give you his opinion and give it to you very straight.
Where will it all end? Don't ask the U.S. Olympic Committee. They've been too busy preparing for a VIP cocktail party next Monday night in the lush new Camino Real. Howard Cosell reporting from Mexico City.
Well, so Cosell was probably the best-known sportscaster in America at that time. And in 1974, he ended up scoring a radio interview with John Lennon. Tell us about that interview.
By the early 1970s, he's so famous and such an accomplished broadcaster that he started sort of easing his way into pop culture, different realms. And in this case, WABC had a show called Speaking of Everything with Howard Cosell.
This is Howard Cosell. The name of the show is Speaking of Everything. My guest is Mr. John Lennon, one of the Beatles.
John Lennon was living in New York City at the time, obviously, but he was promoting his album Walls and Bridges. So they sat together for about 30 minutes in the fall of 1974 and had an interview where they sort of just covered everything.
John, let's get right to the heart of your troubles and get those out of the way. The continuing apparent attempt by the United States government to effectuate your deportation from this country. The whole thing derives from a marijuana count against you in England, doesn't it?
Yeah, and during the 60s in England, I may as well do a bit of background on it. There was a headhunting policeman.
The United States was trying to deport him for essentially an old cannabis arrest when he was in the United Kingdom. So they sat down and basically had a chat about that, and then, music and the culture of the 60s and all sorts of different things.
Oh, people always said we were leading the 60s, and changing everybody's hair and that. And we were standing up there looking different, but we were reflecting what was going on the streets.
John Lennon, he was sort of charming. He intentionally, a couple of different times in the interview, would kind of use a sports analogy, I think, to sort of charm Howard Cosell.
Creatively, at the moment, it's still that feeling of always trying to make either the perfect record or the perfect song. And I know it's impossible, but that's the thing that keeps you going. I guess in sport, it'd be the perfect play.
Why do you think these two guys, who were so different in many ways, why do you think they took such a liking to one another?
They were both creatures of New York in a way, right? John Lennon had moved to New York in the early 1970s. He found the city to be a city that he could get lost in, a city that he could be himself in. He could walk the streets and not necessarily be mobbed. He could sort of live life as John Lennon in the way in which he wanted to do it.
It's good to be in America. It's the center of the world as far as I'm concerned. And this is where the music came from that influenced me as a child.
And Howard Cosell was a classic character of New York.
Live from New York, the city whose landmarks are familiar all over the world's center for shipping, transportation, communications, finance, fashions, and above all, entertainment.
They were both creatures of the 1960s. John Lennon and the Beatles had revolutionized music. And at the very same time, Howard Cosell had sort of used that energy, that sort of counterculture 1960s energy, and channeled it into his job as a sports broadcaster.
Well, fast forward a few months, and Cosell and Lennon connect for another interview, this time with a much larger audience. How did that second interview on Monday Night Football come about?
The way the story was told by Frank Gifford many years later was that they were in Los Angeles for a Monday Night Football game a few months later.
I had run into John Lennon that afternoon at the Beverly Wilshire Hotel. It suggested that if he wanted to come to the game, he certainly could come to the game. And
in fact, they had Ronald Reagan, who was then the governor of California, set up to be on the halftime show and be interviewed by Howard Cosell. And then that night at the game, sure enough, Frank Gifford turns around.
And there was Governor Reagan standing in the upper chair. We had his arm around John Lennon. He was explaining American football to John Lennon, and they were having a great time.
And he kind of hits Howard Cosell on the shoulder and says, hey, look, we have John Lennon here with Ronald Reagan. And then the famous words from Howard Cosell were, I'll take the Beatle.
Mr. John Lennon.
Hello,
John,
Howard.
nice to see you, John.
Nice
Want to move
here.
that up just a little closer?
How are you?
What's been your view of this American professional football scene?
It's an amazing event and sight. It makes rock concerts look like tea parties.
It was kind of a classic in-game interview, really only about 90 seconds or 2 minutes long. And they were essentially talking about the comparisons between soccer or rugby and in American football.
It's nothing like soccer, but I can see a very close relationship to rugby football, which has the same shaped ball and they move 15 yards down the line at a time. But I can see the game here has changed completely from that.
But also in the middle of the interview, he asked John Lennon, hey, will the Beatles ever reunite?
Will the Beatles ever reunite?
You never know. You never know. I mean, it's always in the wind. If it looked like this, it might be worth doing, right?
If it could look like this, kind of pointing around to the football stadium with all the fans, like if it could look like this, hey, you never know, you never know.
Thank you very much,
It's been
John.
a pleasure. Thanks for having me, Howard.
Well, maybe we'll get to talk to you later in the show.
If you're like me, you start thinking about what to eat for dinner while you're sitting down having lunch. As much as I love food, there are times that getting into the kitchen and cooking something delicious just does not make it onto my to-do list. And that's why I love Postmates. With Postmates, you can get food delivered without leaving the house or even opening your front door. And with the current state of the world in mind, Postmates created no-contact deliveries. So now when I order from local restaurants, the food gets left on my doorstep and the app lets me know when it's been delivered. Just download Postmates on iOS or Android, find your favorites, and get anything you want delivered within the hour. For a limited time, Postmates is giving our listeners $5 off your first 5 orders for your first 7 days. To save $5 on your first 5 deliveries, download the app and use code THELEAD. That's code THELEAD for $5 off your first 5 orders when you download the Postmates app or sign up online. Anything you need, anytime you need it, Postmate it. These days between work and friends and family, our lives can feel like nonstop hustle with an expectation that we have to be on 24/7. Sometimes you just need a minute to turn off and hit reset, and that's when you reach for Coors Light. It's made to chill. Coors Light is cold lagered, cold filtered, and cold packaged. It is as crisp and refreshing as the Colorado Rockies, perfect for a moment to unwind. One of my favorite ways to relax right now is turning on a football game, and for me, that is the ideal time to crack one open. Don't miss the new packaging from Coors Light, which is already hitting shelves. The new design features clear skies that invite you to sit back, unwind, and drink it all in. And the iconic Coors Light mountains still turn blue when your beer is as cold as the Rockies. Coors Light is the one I choose when I need to unwind, so when you want to hit reset, reach for the beer that's made to chill. Get Coors Light in the new look delivered straight to your door at get.coorslight.com. Remember to celebrate responsibly. Coors Brewing Company, Golden, Colorado. Everyone likes shopping online, but searching for coupon codes is kind of a bummer. So make saving online a breeze with Capital One Shopping. Capital One Shopping is a free tool that instantly searches for available coupon codes and automatically applies them at checkout. Just download Capital One Shopping to your computer and let it do the work for you. So easy, and you don't even need a Capital One card to use it. Capital One Shopping. It's kind of genius. What's in your wallet? Savings and available coupons vary.
Well, so Rustin, you interviewed a former Monday Night Football producer named Bob Goodrich. Could you walk us through the events of December 8th, 1980 from his perspective?
Yeah, so on December 8th, the Monday Night Football crew was in Miami at the Orange Bowl. The Patriots were playing at the Dolphins.
When he been in, he finds a gaping hole. He's out over the 25 to the 26-yard line. And
Bob Goodrich was in the production truck at the Orange Bowl with the typical television crew. Late in the fourth quarter, he gets a phone call from somebody at ABC News who says, hey, we just got some word out of New York City. John Lennon has been shot.
I don't know if the person that called me was telling the truth. I don't know if they were with ABC News like they said. I had no idea. It obviously scared me.
A local ABC News reporter had been in a motorcycle accident in Central Park and had been rushed to the hospital, was in the emergency room when John Lennon arrived, saw it, called the local ABC affiliate, which then notified ABC News. Eventually, the news got back to the crew in Miami and was confirmed that not only had John Lennon been shot, but he'd been rushed to the hospital and had been announced dead on arrival.
And then I told all 3 announcers at the same time. I think it was during a commercial. And I said, I got some bad news, guys, and, this and that and so forth. And Howard, he was very, very upset. I mean, he was friends with Lennon, and it was very unusual to hear Howard upset about something.
So there was a conversation between Howard and Frank Gifford about what they should do. And Frank said, according to the audio that's come out in previous years, and including some reporting by ESPN, that he basically told Howard, no, we have to do this.
I can't see this game situation allowing for that news flash. Can you? Absolutely, I can see it. You can? You betcha. We've got to. If we know it, we've got to do it. All right. I don't hang on. It's a tragic moment. All right. This is going to shake up the whole world. All right. I will get it in.
Howard was also shaken up, but he knew that it was, his duty as the newsman to go on the air and announce that John Lennon had died.
Remember, this is just a football.